Welcome to the Talk Doesn't Cook Rice podcast with myself, John Staskowski, and Danny Massaro, where we explore thought-provoking concepts and provide practical insights to enrich modern life. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is something. This is nothing. This is solid. This is space. Between yourself and the world of nature outside you.
Right, Danny, languishing, a term coined by the American sociologist Corey Keyes, who first introduced it in, I think, 2002. And then a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is from his more recent book, Languishing, How to Feel Alive Again in a World That Wears Us Down. Probably what I'll do is I'll give a brief overview of languishing, but then I think it might be more useful to just outline flourishing and depression to give us a bit of a grounding for where languishing as a concept fits in. Like I say, first talked about this term in 2002, where a lot of his research is around things like mental wellness, probably more of a lack of mental wellness, mental illness, things like that. And he has this dual continuum model where mental wellness exists on two different dimensions. So you've got mental illness and you've got mental health. And people can have no mental illness, but still quite poor mental health. Or people can have a mental illness and actually still have quite high mental health. So as an example, someone with bipolar disorder can still feel happy, interested in the life. They've got warm, trusting relationships. And they're kind of like existing with one another. Now, when most people mention mental health, Corey Keyes is saying what they're really sort of referring to is mental illness. So we have to split them apart. So in terms of mental health, the term that Corey Keyes uses is flourishing. And that's going to be the thing that is going to go alongside what we're going to be talking about with languishing. So flourishing is basically characterized by positive emotions, just general engagement in your life. You feel like you've got purpose, that you're functioning well. You probably feel that you've got quite a lot of emotional vitality. You've got meaning, strong social connections, and essentially you've just got a purposeful life. That's flourishing. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum would be depression. So things like mental illness, that's a clinical disorder that's characterized by things like sadness, hopelessness. You really struggle with just your day-to-day functioning. Even getting out of bed can be an effort. And things like sadness are just really felt quite acutely. And obviously that can go on to things like suicidal thoughts and even more serious things. So they're two ends of the spectrum. Now, the focus for today is languishing, which sort of comes in between the two. So languishing is really, you don't really feel good or bad. It's like this middle ground of like, you don't really feel much at all. So people who are languishing might say things like, well, I feel a bit lost, feel a bit empty, feel a bit numb. Corey Keyes even says things like, people will say, I feel like I'm dying inside. And it's just this really sort of, it's not really either a positive or a negative. It's absence of both in many ways. And like we say, it sits between flourishing and mental illness. As we'll get into, Corey Keyes thinks that this is quite a big thing. A lot of people are languishing in life. So that's what we're going to chat about today. Danny, how's this looking for you initially?
Oh, I can't be bothered.
I thought that as well. It's a bit of a long introduction.
Oh, there's got to be more to life than this. I think this interested me. You brought it up, didn't you? We always think about topics to do. And you'd said that you'd noticed that you talk to quite a lot of people, sometimes in your work, sometimes around. And on the surface, again, things look like they're pretty well functioning. All the boxes are ticked in a way of, so, you know, job, career, all these things, and house and kids and whatever, or whatever they want, and go on holidays and so on. A bit like the Burnout Society episode, you know, a lot of the things that modern society says or like tells you that are important, you're up with it. You know, these things are happening. However, you've been noticing people that just slightly underneath that are a little bit like tired or like what's it all for though? You know, if it's the effect of the joy of and the happiness of all these things have rubbed off a bit, and I'm sort of in the everyday, you know, Heidegger's everydayness. So that everydayness, what Heidegger called, where you live all the time, all the little moments, isn't vibrant. It's more like a means to an end. It's a bit more dull. then you would hope it to be a bit less fun and exciting, I suppose. And that's why when I work with players, I talk about this low level vibrancy. Not that they have to always constantly be in good moods, because you'll be up and down with results and obviously how tired you are. And that's kind of normal in life. In our well-being episode, we talk that there is no such thing as constant well-being or constant vibrancy. You do have ebbs and flows, and that can be linked to your biology, your mental states, and, the social situations you find yourself in, absurd events that just happen randomly and life comes at you. And it's like, whoa, I'm just having a tough up and down day. But this isn't that, like the ups and downs and ebbs and flows. This is just more like, where there isn't really anything majorly going wrong in your day. There isn't really anything massive. Why do you still feel a bit low level anxious that you're not, that things aren't exciting and things, there's not a lot to look forward to. So vibrancy is something, and flourishing is something where you can kind of tell in a person when they're on it, in the flourishing, and they're excited and they're looking forward to the small things. So that's what makes it interesting for me, because that's a state that I've always thought my best to work for. I've become highly aware that it's something that, like, I have to earn each day, and it needs feeding. For me, I've got to keep on top of it. What makes me tick through all the different phases of my life as I change and my circumstances change? What makes me tick? What keeps me vibrant? And I think that goes back to when I was younger, and sort of noticing the difference between the sort of flat days where I'm and it all feels a bit grey. What Frankl called that Sunday neurosis, where you're a bit, got another week of work coming, got to be better than this, versus the sort of Friday feeling that people talk about, the Friday feeling of the anticipation of the weekend. So I was like, why can't you have the Friday feeling, like, not necessarily as high as that, but like all the time? Why can't every day, or, why can't you have at least a little bit of spring in your pep in your step every day? And again, that changes through your life, because sometimes you're locked onto long-term goals and long-term ambitions and big dreams. So that could be more in your younger years and going for something big. But then as you get older, you're approaching your 50s or into, that then days of, they might be gone. You might have seen the other side of the curtain and like, well, I've got the big, it's not so much now. Now I need to find that sort of excitement in doing my garden, in cookery, in skills, learning new things, being with my mates, just chilling, playing games, new hobbies, so I think for me, it's flourishing is something that needs feeding, and it's sort of a skill. You've got to learn, like, how to constantly kind of ask what's making me tick, what's making me vibrant, and what's sort of making me feel a bit soulless, and be prepared to change around that. So it's a very interesting topic for me. It's about mental health, not mental illness. It's about, right, how do we have this mental health going well? And
we'll get onto that in a little bit, actually. He's a bit of a, not campaigner, but he's very big on, look, we need to stop just talking about mental health when we're meaning mental illness all the time, and like, we just need more support, we just need more this, we need more that. He's like, we've never had as much of that stuff, and it's still getting worse every year. More people are getting mentally ill every year. So we need to be thinking about mental health first, and that means how can we help people flourish? And that's a very different thing. And we'll obviously get into that. The big danger with languishing, just in line with that, is if Corey Key says that if people spend too long languishing, that can then become, and they're more likely to get, mentally ill. That's what he's saying. He's like, look, we need to focus on these people who aren't yet mentally ill, but they're languishing, they're still not flourishing, and that could lead them to become mentally ill. That's a better focus than just going on about people who are already mentally ill. Yeah, those people you mentioned, I am coming across this a little bit more with like different clients and stuff where, there's not, I suppose the word that keeps coming up is stuck. Like, there's this, people have this sense of just a little bit stuck in what they're doing. And on the face of it, they can be really quite successful. They're doing well. They're pretty well high performing. And on the face of it, they've kind of got the dream career in lots of ways. But it's like internally just like, like, is this all it is? Like, I just like, well, I'm a bit stuck, but I don't really know what to do to get unstuck. And they're just kind of spinning the wheels a little bit. And I think this can be languishing in lots of ways. Now, Corey Key says when it comes to flourishing, there's two general aspects of that when people are flourishing and functioning well. So the first one is psychological well-being. And if you remember quite a while ago now, we did an episode on the psychologically rich life, didn't we? Which kind of feeds into this, I think. And if you think of the spiral as well, when we did the spiral dynamics episode, the left-hand side of the spiral, that I, me, mine, that's psychological well-being, where it is about you. It's more of an internal, like, what's my purpose in life? You know, I'm trying to grow and improve and develop myself. I've got sort of, I don't know, like a bit of an acceptance of who I am, what makes me tick, what I'm about, like you were saying. That's the first aspect. But the other aspect of functioning well is social well-being. So that's the right-hand side of the spiral, isn't it? The us, we, etc. And that's like, yeah, how integrated do you feel in a community? Do you feel like you're contributing to society or just people generally? Do you feel like you're helping others? And how accepting are you of other people in that? Now, they're the two sides of the coin of flourishing, which easier said than done, aren't they? But look, they're just important. And he talks about the 5 vitamins for a flourishing life, and we'll talk about those a little bit later on as a takeaway. Now, obviously, like just to compare back to languishing, you know, those feelings of emptiness, stagnation, lack of joy. I like your term, I like vibrancy. That brings, it feels like real, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, like, do you just have that bit of a buzz about what you're doing? Cognitively, though, he says, like, well, you might have difficulty concentrating. You just can't really focus on much. You can't really solve problems. You're just not able to think dynamically. Behaviorally, you might have reduced motivation, decreased productivity. You might just be generally disengaged from the activities you're doing or working on. Things that you maybe used to enjoy no longer give you that buzz, that vibrancy. So yeah, for me, it's just an interesting one of, I think it's big, like, and it's maybe like a bit of an under the radar thing that is quite common that people don't realize. Now, Corey Keyes' book, he couldn't have probably written it at a better time. And a lot of his research that he was doing absolutely blew up during COVID, because that was a time, and we've mentioned this a couple of times, where people were forced to stay at home. Even people who were quite high up the socioeconomic pyramid, if you like, people who were really well off and got a lot of resource and things, even they had the wings clipped a bit, didn't they? It's like, oh, you can't leave the house. We're going to take things away from you that you normally would have done. You're going to be isolated. You can't socialize with people. We're going to disrupt your usual routines. So it's quite obvious that people noticed languishing during COVID because it was like forced upon people. However, Corey's like, yeah, but even before COVID was even a thing, I was seeing this in, I think he reckoned 40 to 50% of people, that languishing was a part of like the daily being, I suppose. It was part of the being as a human. So it's, yeah, I just think it's an interesting one to talk about because it's probably way more common than people would like to admit. Even people who are generally quite successful, you could still be languishing.
The COVID example is a good one. There was a phenomenon around it where if you had the luxury to languish in a way, like you'd have all kids running around and you'd no money and so on. Let's say you were used to all your freedoms, you've got money and, you know, you had options on Amazon to buy things in and like pizza ovens and, you know, whatever was popular. And, you know, you were getting new furniture in and new games and things, you know, records and music, whatever. Well, I think what it did in some ways, it forced you back into the little things. It forced you back into having just I did a yoga session, I did a routine, I talked to some friends on a Saturday, and I sort of valued having a bit more communication again. What's interesting, this has got to be tied into energy levels and as well, because when you're flat out busy all the time, it's really hard now to get, what I might even just say it, an appointment with your friends.
Yeah.
It's like you just drop in on someone's house or just go, it's Thursday, and you say, oh, fancy doing this on Saturday afternoon. It's like, no. I need a minimum of 6 weeks. Like, you know how packed my calendar is. You know, don't be spontaneous. Don't just, so part of the feeling of tired or less, you know, whatever, on a treadmill or a bit stuck is stuck in the sort of busyness.
Seriousness as well. Busyness and seriousness. Life is serious.
Yeah, that's right. That was the Beauvoir's thing, wasn't it? One of her things, you know, she said that people if you can get serious about everything, then you sort of don't have to worry. You don't have to think too much, just get in. But that eventually drags you down. because everything's just like onto this, onto this, onto this. Whereas COVID, you had this time, more of a spatial time, and at first a bit unsettling and nervy, but then you started to fill it in with enough gaps. So you might have picked back up some old hobbies or remembered the feelings of space and spontaneity or boredom. So boredom isn't necessarily languishing. Boredom can serve as, well, I was bored for 3 hours and now I don't like to be bored all the time. But now that I've got a little task to do, let's get excited about it. Let's bake some cakes. And then you get a lot of meaning from it. Or you do the garden, or you do some painting, you do some housework, or you do the weeding, or you do these things that you wouldn't normally have time for because you saw so many more seriously important things. And I think when you watch, when I watch people who live around me who flourish, and I watch neighbours and community members around me, what it is, they're often into the small things. They're not looking too far out of themselves. It's like an internal path rather than an external path. So they're not necessarily looking for external praise and gratification all the time, or what everyone thinks of them and whether they think that they're doing the great life and all this. They're sort of bogged down into their own internal things, quirky things sometimes that they get a little buzz out of, and it wouldn't necessarily be for someone else. So I can see someone going for a run because they've got their own little reasons for why they do like doing a little run around the block or up a hill. Whereas I see some people are doing a run because they're doing it for Strava and they're doing it for external sort of credit, to look great. And that's fine, but that's a different reason. And that's something that it's so subtle, the reason why you're doing something. It's not like you tell everybody those deep reasons why you're doing something. You just see the thing that somebody's doing, but there's an underlying reason why that thing's being done, and that's usually the thing that gives something meaning, or you're doing it for something else. And I love the bit in the book where he talked about people who often say that they have a career. They have I'm a coach and I've got a coaching career or whatever. They sort of see the end goal of that and the image of what that would be at the end. I'm on a path, I'm on a career. Whereas when you focus on the right here and right now and what's in front of you, it's not so much where the work's taking you. It's more about the kind of work that you're doing now, today. So when I say to students sometimes who are teaching in sports coaching, I say at the end of the day, really sports coaching is just people helping people. You've not got a coaching career. A coaching career is like, I need to get all my badges, need to get a better job, a bigger job, more notoriety, build a business, become a thing. Whereas all you're doing at the end of the day is just a person helping another person. And that then can form a career by proxy. That it might look like some weird, but it's not. The original aim is just to help people. I'm just here to help people. That's it. And then if it's called a career after that, fine. But you don't set out like a designed, like, I want to get to this place. Obviously, when you're younger, that might be something that gets you going. And I'm not saying that's a totally bad thing. You do need an element of that. But ultimately, you get to a point where it's the kind of work you do that almost writes your own reputation. But if you're going in and you're coaching some young kids versus coaching the top pros, it's basically all the same. You're just the person helping a person. And then there's so much more meaning in that. That's what makes you go home at night proud. That's what makes you feel good. You treat people like they are worth your time. You treat little projects like they're worth your time. You treat your dog like it's worth your time. You make food for people like it's important. There's love and attention and care in it. And that's what ultimately these little joys of the quality of what you do each moment is more important than, I'm a managing director now of this thing that I always, and I think that's where it goes a bit wonky. I think you get these people who say they're stuck and they focused way too much on the external titles, and all that other stuff will just be looked after if I'm high up the chain in a career. But actually, it doesn't. You've still got to go in and be very, very basic. It's the kind of work you do every day, not the external sort of label of it.
I made a note of that. I'm trying to find where he said it because he had a lovely point around that on being better for people rather than being better than people. So again, I've maybe butchered it a little bit, but that was the gist of it. Like, too many people that you get obsessed with just being better than others. So that's why you want to improve and develop and do all that stuff, because I want to be better than them.
Yeah.
To whether earn more money or get the job or whatever.
Yeah.
But actually, he was like, flourishing is much more about how can you be better for others? Like, what are you doing to help others?
Yeah.
And just helping them because you can. and because it's genuinely going to help them rather than you're going to get too much out of it. Personally, that is a big part of flourishing.
I asked Laura earlier what she thought flourishing was to her, and she was like, well, it's changed since I was a professional athlete. It was obviously more about longer goals and getting my training sessions done. But ultimately, she said, actually, it just comes back to the same thing now, just being proud of myself. And she said, well, how am I proud of myself? She says, I sort of like doing something well so that I get some sort of satisfaction whilst I'm doing it, and I'll get a delayed reward, delayed gratification type thing. Said, oh, okay. She says, but saying that, she said, I could still be a bit weird with people, a bit aloof sometimes, because I'm a bit self-serious, like we just said, like I'm perfect, I'm right, I'm doing everything. It's a bit more mechanical. She says she was listening to some podcasts and Simon Cowell, of all people, popped up. And the thing that has affected her was that Simon Cowell said when he was a young lad, or his father said to him, or his teenager, father said to him one day, look, Simon, everybody goes around with a sign on the head saying, I want to be important. He said, never forget that. He says, people want to feel valued and important. And it ties into this thing as well of people need to feel needed, right? If you feel needed and which means I'm important to you, then that gives you so much of this flourishing. And I think Keyes talks about a whole chapter on this. And this is a massive, this was the most biggest point of all for me, that humans need to feel needed for other people, part of the tribe. Therefore, I'm valuable. You still get introverts and you still get extroverts, probably more needy people than others, but ultimately you need to feel important to other people and needed. And when you don't, and you're ignored and you're just seen as like some sort of service person for me. So Laura said, yeah, she said, that has changed my meaning a lot because I'm going around like the shops and the club and with clients and, and people, and they're all like, they've leveled out. Like there's a person, there's a person, there's a person. She's important. He's important. He deserves a hello. She deserves 5 minutes of my time in a conversation. And once you start doing that and you talk to people, you get conversations going again, and you feel like you can see people. It's very, very wholesome because you feel very connected, and you've also dropped that rush to try and be better than people all the time. Now, of course, you can still be better than people because you're just quality, but that's not been the original point of it. It's not a desperation to keep that up. It's more of an internal, like, I'm not in competition with you. I see someone who's important there and you're worth my time. It's like a very sort of human, meaningful thing, and it's nice. And that makes you feel flourishing. That makes you feel like the world's good. There's good people in it.
Yeah, if you think that's the opposite to that burnout society persona that we were talking about, achievement subject, where it's all about achieving, hustling, being productive. Time is money. I can't be wasting time. Like, come on, like I've got to get something out of this next hour. We've got to achieve something here. It's moving away from that, isn't it? Which is, I just quite like that as a perspective. Actually, what he says about that notion of people feeling like you're needed, he actually says people who are languishing often don't feel like they have anything to offer. And that's key in it. Like, it could be anything. It can be anything. Just going around and making someone a brew and just listening to their shit for half an hour.
Yeah.
You maybe don't actually offer them anything but your time and an ear. That's enough to help you feel that sense of flourishing rather than like just going around like that all the time. One thing you said earlier, when you're on about busyness and seriousness, that's definitely something I've tuned into more recently, where I'm trying to be more present with people in that way. And if you think, I was just thinking then when you were speaking, these podcasts, because it's a podcast and we're obviously recording what we're saying, we're present. It's like you're sat listening to me, I'm sat listening to you, and there's no interruptions. Like anyone, like people know, all he knows I'm doing a podcast, so just don't bother me. Laura knows Danny's up doing a podcast. It's quite a nice little hour just carved out, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you have to be present and it's intentional, and I'm just like, we're just engaging. I'm trying to do that way more, even like in less formal settings where it's just like, do you need your phone? Like we're going out with the dog. Do we need our phones? No, just leave them and just do what we're doing, like engage in the actual thing. And I see that a lot with people, especially different clients I work with, where they're just so used to being online. And it's like, how often are you genuinely just in the conversation and you're not watching notifications popping off there and this is going on? I know it's tough, But I find that's a massive difference. Like just trying to tune it into the not multitasking and all that shit. It's just like, right, what we're doing now, I'm having a chat with Danny.
Yeah.
And that's it. And no phones, no interruptions. That's it. And I think that helps you again. It just makes the time, I think, a bit more valuable to me than when you just spread thin. It's like, if you're going to do something, do it proper. Like, give something your attention and be intentional with it. I think that's just a massively important thing now. And going back, you're on about sports coaching students. When I was reading the book and I was like thinking about it, I thought, do you know what? Back when I was working at the university, I think students could be some of the biggest languishers ever. Not all of them, but a lot of them, in that sense of how many of them have genuinely gone to uni because they're genuinely passionate about the subject they're studying and they just want to learn and get into it, and they're just like, they're there for the learning, versus it's like, oh, well, I don't really want to get a job, like what else can I do? And you kind of go and they spend maybe 3 years just languishing, where they're not disliking it because there's good bits to uni and like all the stuff around it, but they're not loving it either. It's just like a bit of a, oh, well, I'm just doing it. I'm just kind of going along with the flow. And that for me is a bit like, yeah, they want the qualification ultimately for the next step, rather than, no, I'm doing this because I'm like mad into it and I'm going to get internal stuff out of it. So I always thought that's like a bit of a, it's just weird, isn't it? How that should be the epitome of flourishing, a place of learning and development and scholarship. And it's kind of the opposite. Even the staff, not just the students, even the staff, how many like lecturers and academics are just there. And it's like, do you actually enjoy what you do? And it's kind of like, well, not really, but I don't hate it. It kind of keeps the lights on and they're just going through the motions, aren't they? They're not really flourishing. They're just languishing.
Well, I think when you think back to school days and college and university, I totally agree with that. And I think teachers who are languishing type characters, and then teachers that are vibrant and flourishing. You just know because it's like the first time they've ever taught it, but they know the stuff and they're excited to teach it, and then they take you in.
And again, though, it's not like an extroverted, like kind of like characters that way. It's just a more subtle vibrancy in it. You just get a vibe off them.
Yeah. Any style, any personality. It could be a long lecture where they have to listen. And this is where I always used to say, it wasn't the teaching style as such for me. It was how it was delivered. That's what they used to talk a lot about. Oh, we watched your lesson and you didn't mix it up with enough styles to cater for everybody. And I thought, yeah, okay, fair play. But I was bloody interesting for 50 minutes, like way more interesting than maybe it's good for them to sit there and listen to someone who loves what they're doing. Maybe they're learning more than just the topic. Maybe they're learning about flourishing, about, gosh, this person always turns up, and it goes on a bit, but they're always on it. There's always a bit of a like get up and go and let's learn it, and this is good. These are the good days. This is a good moment. This is a good topic. Isn't this interesting? I love this. Do you like it? Why don't you like it? Come on, try and defend. Well, what do you like instead? So you're always probing. And are you right? When you come across languishing people, it's very hard to teach them and coach them, because it's more than just they're not interested in you. They're not interested in anything. And it's worrying, because you think, oh, at your age, there's a dullness going on here and nothing's really appealing. So the red flags are there. And then you look into it and there's no real hobbies, and so the hobbies become I don't know, be friends, like being top of the group or be getting up to mischief is the only way you feel alive. And I know it does mention in the book that, then some kids get so languishing that then it does link into start going into mental health and
mental
illnesses and all these things, and hurting themselves. And so, because it's just like a bit of a sort of nothingness feeling. So, I mean, it's not as simple as there's more than various explanations for that. But languishing, when you come across kids that are just sometimes a bit flat, I can understand it, because some lessons and topics at school and you have to sit there are terrible. But there should always be 2 or 3 or 4 subjects that they're up for it. And you're right, when you get to university, I know my own experience of university as a student was definitely not flourishing. I was just more like survival and then having bits of spiked pleasures here and there. But then when I went to work and started working and then got back into squash and started really thinking about these things, learning, getting fit, tied into the bioenergetics as well, like eating well, sleeping well, then there was like this sort of like more of a, right, I'm on track. I can feel I'm on a bit of a good track here. I'm on a path that for me is where I need to be. And when I come off that track, I know I'm not on the track, if you know what I mean. I know the track I need to be on. So I come off it, too many nights out, not eating enough to that. I don't go too far from it and sort of like nudge myself back on it. And I think learning about mental well-being, health, and learning about positive sort of psychology in a way that it's not just an absence of negatives, but it's actually a state of having positives.
Yeah.
I think that I've clocked that in people quite early. I think, well, why aren't you in a positive state? Because there should be a lot of moments where you are in a positive state. There should be vibrancy. There should be a buzz. So when you see youngsters who just don't have that, and then they're getting up to mischief and getting in trouble and things, that's a bit strange. One of the things is, it goes back to purpose, doesn't it, as well? When you feel like you've got a bit of a purpose and stuff. The two questions that I thought were good that he said to think about were, firstly, number one, do I want to help others? And then number two, do I believe I have a talent, skill, or personal quality with which to do so? So that feeling of contribution, that feeling of, I think children and people are always looking for it. So even if it's like, can I make people laugh? And you're quite funny, you probably become a bit of a joker character. Can I look after people and protect them? You probably do that a lot, as a young kid. Practically, can I turn up for them and help them, or, bring them things and be there for them and play with them? Like, yeah, I can turn up and be the friend and play with them. So I do want to help them. I do want to be nice to them, and I have got the qualities to go out and do it. I think sport does that, doesn't it? It's like, right, we're a team, especially team sports. Like we all need each other, and I've got the skills to be a goalkeeper or a batsman, or I've got the skills to be a midfield player and tackle and defend you. I've got the skills to put the ball in the net, so we can all contribute to each other. And I think on a really basic level, it's that. It's like, do I want to help people, and can I contribute? Have I got the skills to do it? When you feel like you have, and you're appreciated, and you do a good job, I think that can get you going in the morning. So, like you say, this podcast, Stephen, it's like, can I help other people? Well, yeah, but by some of the things I know and the way I am a bit good, have I got the skills to do it? Yeah, I can talk, I can do this. We can do this together. So I know I get like an internal feeling and excitement and structure to my days by preparing to do this and doing it. So that's good in itself. It kills some time in a really good way.
It gives you a bit of purpose, doesn't it? It's nice, actually. Yeah, like the week, once we go, because we randomly come up with topics, don't we? Never really play. It's just like, have you seen this? This looks quite good.
Yeah.
But it gives you a bit of structure that week before, doesn't it? It's like, I've got something to listen to and read and just like focus on.
Yeah, get
nice.
Up to it and perform. Yeah. And I don't want to mess up, and I want to do a good job, and I want to do it, and I hope it comes out well, and I don't want to let John down, and I want to make it good quality, and I want him to like me, and vice versa. And so you have all these little reasons you do it, but then on the other side of it is selfish, and it is for that. It's like, well, 3, 4, 5 people or maybe more might listen to this, and it genuinely like helps, because it's kind of it's our wheelhouse, isn't it? It's what we do. It's like, we're not thinking that we're the best psychologists in the world, but it's a little bit of something good going in the world, and it might help people understand an area that for them is a bit confusing. So when I look at like a video on YouTube on how to maybe do, replace, some tap or something, I don't know anything about that, and it helps me. So I think there's always that sort of educational, I'm helping myself by helping others. So that as well gives you meaning.
Yeah. That
makes you feel like getting up and doing something quality, because it's just a good quality thing to do and put out there.
It's nice because as well, like, to be fair, this must be the worst marketed podcast in existence. Like, we literally do nothing with it. We just record it, put it on there. But it is nice, because I think we would still do this if no one listened. There's enough purpose and meaning in it just for us that we get out of it. And that's enough. But it's undeniably nice when we get messages from people. It's like, oh, listen to your podcast, really helped me with this, or that was good, or that was interesting. I'm doing this now. That's nice, isn't it? Like it's just done that. It gives you that warm little bit of vibrancy. You go and you think, oh, someone did listen to that and it helped them in whatever way. That is, it's just a nice feeling. Just to go back to when you were on about, what were you on? Oh, you were on about like teachers with a certain vibe, and like you pick up on it. Doesn't necessarily need to be in your face, but you just pick up of a sense of, I like being around these. It's just a bit of an energy that I like being around. It gives you energy, doesn't it, to be around them?
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily shouting and being motivational. It's just energizing to be sort of in the company. One thing he mentioned, I think he actually mentioned this on a podcast I listened to, Corey Keys. He's explicit on like actually being quite, maybe ruthless is the wrong word, but quite ruthless with the people you interact with and actually let into your life. So he gives the example of like, so social media now, you can get friend requests from anyone on the planet, like anywhere you've never met them. They can like add you or follow you, or like they can sort of come into your consciousness from nowhere. And he was like saying, he's like, I literally, unless I know them personally, I will never accept just a random thing. And it's quite a nice analogy he said for in your day-to-day life, who are you surrounding yourself with? Because if you're going to surround yourself with a load of people who are just languishing, it will sort of pull you down a little bit into that thing. So he's like, you've got to be careful, be really picky who you let into your life. Social media exposes you to way too much, but even in real life, don't just like waste time, be pickier. Even in the workplace, like who are you knocking about with? Who are your colleagues? Do you want to be around them? Are they giving you vibrancy, energy, or are they going to sap you and like kind of mood hoover type of thing? And you just like, it can pull you back in. So you just got to be careful with that, I think. And I was listening to that. Obviously, you get like the confirmation bias, but I thought, shit, I've been doing that for years. Like, I'm like pretty ruthless, I know, when it comes to, as soon as I feel like this is costing me this now, not monetarily, but in just energy, and it's a bit, I just like, like you're not seeing me. I've got a much smaller group of quality people who I'm like, consider them my sort of inner circle, and I'm quite happy with that. I don't need hundreds and thousands of people like pecking at me. I think that was quite a good point he made. That can help with flourishing. High quality over just like surface level.
I get it. And you know, these jobs, if you have to work, and like working in doctors and nursing and police and teaching, and you know, it's flipping tricky because there's, you know, if you're around people a lot that are languishing and a bit not bringing that positive, not matching your energy, it's very sapping, isn't it? It's tough. And we have the luxury, I suppose, or the skill in some ways to, it's nice to meet strangers and have new conversations and so on. And I think you get on like you say, you get on a vibration, don't you, with people, but you both know that you're independent. So it's like, we can have a little natter and a chat and so on, but you'll go off on your own and you're not being too needy. And I know that we've had that bang, that really good bit, and then I'm going to go off. I think that's definitely the case for me as well, when it is nice that you get a lift sometimes off people. So you're used to giving energy out, but it's nice when someone comes and gives you some energy in, just in the way they are. All different personalities. They just might give you some information, just interesting. They listen to you. They made you laugh. You know, that it wasn't all, you know, doom and gloom, and they thought that they were expert. There's a bit of critical thinking there, so they get your brain going. That's a big thing I've seen in coaching a lot. That all the best coaches, I could name you now 7 or 8 squash coaches I know, and they're not all my cup of tea in terms of their content, their information, but what they all have, they all have flourishing. They're flourishing in their own way, and there's an energy there, and they're definitely not energy sapping. And I've come to learn that I actually end up liking these people, whereas I used to would have just not detested them, but gone the other way. But now, because I think, well, at least you're bloody interesting. At least you have a point to say. At least you think life's worth living. You can't deny that. You might not be the way I do it, but I can understand it, and I know why your players buzz off it a bit, because you sort of, you might might be a bit obstinate, you might be a bit, I know everything, and you might be, but fair play, you're not a sulking, and you're not, life's for living. And I think sports like that, come on, let's get out there and seize the moment, all the cliches, control the controllables, all them things. It's like, let's go and play. And there's a playfulness. There is a serious element, but the seriousness is almost playful. It's like, let's onwards and upwards. It's like, come on, let's move on. We'll fix it. There's a bit of like, damn, and anger and emotions. It's not about no negative emotions, but then emotions get spun back round into movement and motion. And again, what I said at the end of the study I did and my research was, one of the things was stay in motion. Try and keep yourself in motion and development through the phases of your life relative to what makes you tick. And I'll bang on about that all my time, all my life about, but that's was a lot of thinking and a lot of research, a lot of philosophy, a lot of existentialism, a lot of psychological theories. And it's the same as the spiral dynamics. It's have that adaptability through the phases of your life, and the work never ends, which kind of kicks in this like new day. It's a new day, right? Let's get on it. There's new opportunities, the new world. It's not all dross and doom and gloom, and that's what you need. I think it's quite hard at the moment for like the England manager. I think he's saying in football that, all right, they're not playing very well, but everybody's like so floundering and blah. They all need the England team to play like Barcelona at the peak, just to feel better on a Wednesday morning. It's like, get your own meaning. These lads are running around trying to, all right, did he play great? But why is it suddenly so massively impactful on you that you feel depressed about how these young lads are trying to play football? They're good players. All right, you can have a little criticism, but again, I think what you get in a society where people are floundering and a bit like not flourishing and lacking meaning and languishing, I think you outsource your meaning too much to things that are not in your control. So the football starts to matter more. The politics starts to matter more. And you're like, well, that's not bringing in me. It's just adding to how shit life is. You know what I mean? So like, you can have critical thought, play with politics and play with your football. But there's a way in there. You can have a little moan and a bit of a snipe, but it's funny and it's a laugh, and you're being hyper negative. But some people are genuinely down about it, and it consumes them. So that's another warning sign for me. Like the lack of, because they're devoid of their own little purposes and little things, the other things that aren't in their control take on too much meaning.
A good phrase, it's maybe not a good phrase, but something I'll have to say to people, and it gives you an insight into what they're like. Because I genuinely think it's true. If you get in there just a little bit down, I'll be, come on, there's never been a better time to be alive. Yeah. And I genuinely don't think there has. Like in history, there has never been a better time to be alive for most of us.
Yeah.
And how they react to that question will give you, when they're, but what about this and what about that? And it's just like, come on, like what's going on in Russia has got nothing to do with you. What's happening in Palestine now? What's happening in the election? Irrelevant to you now. In like, come on, like never been a better time to be alive. What are you going to do? And it gives you a good insight. Just because you mentioned the existentialists a little while ago, we've talked about the existentialists a hell of a lot in different episodes. They obviously preceded Corey Keyes and this notion of languishing, but there is a French term called, or the word is ennui, so ENNUI, which is an existentialist term for a feeling of weariness and dissatisfaction resulting from a lack of interest. That notion of ennui, the existentialists were onto it all the way back then. So it's just, I think, built into us, isn't it? Just part of being human. And I think Corey Keyes not admits to that, but he says that, look, languishing is actually quite natural at times. The key is when you find yourself languishing, don't stay there for too long. It's like, right, come on. Like you said before, right, I'm off track here. How do I get back on track? Yeah. And you consciously, like, you keep going, like, you don't just get stuck. You keep going and do what you need to do. I think that's a big part of it.
I think there's a long-term element to it, though, because, like, people get stuck in cycles and situations where they go, well, I'd love to do that, but I've got my circumstances now as such where I can't leave this job. Because I do think there's an element of this where you have to plot for the long term. So you also have to look down the road and understand that certain things are going to come your way. You're going to get old. The flood's going to come as
Heidegger, in it, like when we did Heidegger Dasein episode, like anticipatory resoluteness. It's like you got to know what's coming. Come on, like anticipate it and let's get resolute.
Yeah, and he called that, if you're resolute, he call it having moments of vision. So in a good way. So yeah, I'm going to get old. That'll be good because I'll be able to do this then. Yeah, we are going to. So if financially you're not stuck in the future too much, but you're like, you look forward to the future and different phases that are coming almost towards death, you know, and all these different bits. But you also practically have to try your best to cater for that if you can with savings and pulling out of opportunities. So there's loads of opportunities I've said no to, for example, or I know you go, I'll turn that one down and I'll turn that down. I actually get this little sense of relief. You're like, oh, thank God I don't have to go to that. You know, it was tempting when they offered it me and I was like, okay, I'll come. And then, so you almost have to, because you're like, well, that'll be good. I'll just get another week at home. Well, what will you do? I don't know, I'll just be pottering around. I love it. Like I can handle the free time. I think it takes you a lot of time to detox from that. I think professional athletes fundamentally will think finishing like on a more existential level. How am I going to be needed if I'm not a superstar footballer? Or how am I going to be needed if the family aren't buzzing off my results? Like I'm just going to be me. So how am I going to be needed? And then it takes you time to go, well, actually, I'm going to be needed because like I need to do the garden. I need to go shopping. I need to help them people there. I need to do this. I'm just needed because I'm a person and my family needs me for this, and this, just to be there, just to listen, just be a normal person type thing. It takes a long time to make that gear shift. And I think that's the same with like a career. It's like, it's hard to get out of that career trap of onwards and upwards and holding that job if you're financially stuck. So it's hard to look to an exciting future because you're trapped. You are stuck. So I think it's important you have a long-term vision of as early as you can of where is this heading? Where are these commitments heading towards?
Yeah.
And that can be in the type of person you marry, how many children you decide to have, where you decide to live, the climate, the types of hobbies that you do, the friends you knock about with. Where is this heading? Because it might be all right for now, but in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I can't see myself flourishing in this. If I'm still going to have to be doing this, then that's ideally not what I would like to be doing at that age.
That's a better approach, I think, you know, rather than a to-do list, which everyone's flipping got on there like a million items long. Yeah. Have a to-don't list. What do I not want to end up being or doing? Yeah. That's often easier because, well, I definitely don't want to do that. I definitely don't want to be living there. That's easier than going, well, what do I want to be doing? It's more threatening that, I think, than just like, well, I definitely don't want to be these things.
Yeah, I think that's what I've noticed with people who've managed to do that. They're less grand in their visions and they're more simple, but they multiply the meaning.
Yeah.
So in terms of flourishing, it's like loads to do. You know, my next door neighbour's amazing. Irene flipping, lost her husband, say 25 years ago to cancer. Like she's just buzzing every day. She's doing painting, she's gardening, she's walking the dog, chatting to everybody, going on holidays, meeting strangers. She's 83. She's full of life. She's determined. You don't want to cross her. She's interesting. She likes learning about things. She'll sit out watching the stars. She'll shout over the fence. Oh, I love that sunshine, but isn't it nice to feel the breeze today, Danny? She's tuned in to the little bits that are important, which, then her family come round and then she has a gossip and then she does this. So she's just like full of the little things. It's like the little big things, actually. There might be little things, but they're the big things, really. And that's something I've learned a lot as well. Like, obviously, having Leo and a youngster's helped me a lot that way. And yeah, because you have to. You're in his little world with all these new little amazing magical bits. And you're like, this is where life is. Life's here. Life's in these things here, and those big things are necessary for your grand, might stamp on life for a bit. But how are you going to exit that as early as you can? How are you going to get over yourself and your big ambitions once you've got enough? Why would you keep multiplying that? Get back to those bits.
Did you read that message I sent you earlier?
No, what did you send me?
Do you know where the word paradise originates from?
Right, go on.
So basically, I think it's the etymology, isn't it, of a word? It's like where it originates, but it basically originates with like in Persia back in the day, and then it was like a Greek and then a Latin word got adapted. In Persia, it meant essentially like walled garden. So the origins of paradise is just a walled garden where you can go and, like you said the word potter earlier, and just have your nice flowers and stuff, and you can go out and sit, and it's secluded from the rest of the world, and it's just your own little kingdom. That's where paradise comes from. And then it, like the Romans etc. took it, and you got to like the Garden of Eden the Bible and stuff and that been linked in. But yeah, that's the original. I learned that this morning.
I can get that because it's, I totally, that hits me, that. I feel that, yeah.
What's she called? Irene?
Yeah.
Irene. So when you say about Irene, you know what I was saying earlier about being ruthless with who you let into your life? He talks about that as well, Corey Keyes. There's an aspect of, all right, well, who are you going to like pursue? Like actually like seek out those people, those Irenes of the world.
Yeah.
Find people who have a similar, he calls it like a life philosophy to you, basically. Yeah. And it doesn't have to mean, oh, well, we're both Buddhists but just have an outlook like that where they're positive, they like learning, they're open to new ideas, they're just in line. Seek them out. So if you think like we're very different in lots of ways, aren't we, you and I? I can rip the piss out of you with loads of stuff and you can do the same with me because we're just so different. But fundamentally at our core, I was thinking like, well, what? And it's like we both just love like learning, developing, like talking about like that kind of connects. And it's like, seek out people who share whatever your life philosophy is and be around it and like cut out all the other shit around it that can help you flourish and get out of that languishing, like, can't be bothered, like what's the point?
Yeah, but you earn it. I think there's a respect because when you do it for yourself, you clock it in others, even though you don't think of it that logically. There's a respect there. So you'll always have bonds with your old friends and you accept the personalities. So you'll always have your mates and people you love and you've got to work at that because they might be different from you. But you do want relationships with your sisters and your brothers and your family and, not unless they're really nasty. And then you just have to like say, nah, that's enough for me. Just because you're my family, I'm not taking that. That's not making me good. But then when you're finding new friends in life and new people, there is a sort of vibration where, you could be totally different and different hobbies, different views, different politics, different ideas. But what you can't deny is that they're not futurists in terms of like the future's amazing, but tomorrow can be better. Like there's an energy. And as I said earlier with the coaches, you end up getting on with people you thought you wouldn't get on with purely on the basis of the fact that you both get up in the morning and you want to make life a bit that good that day. That's good fun then, isn't it? And if because you're both healthy and you're both flippant, you've got the energy to sort of do the banter and you can take the differences of opinion and start learning loads off each other. And then they become very, very valuable to you. And that's a good side. So to finish, what was those sort of...
Yeah, so if we're... So like I mentioned earlier, he talks about, look, come on, we need to... And to quote him, he says, we need to prioritize functioning well over feeling happy. So that focus on when people talk about mental health, basically they mean people who are mentally ill. It's not the same. They're two different tracks that you can be on. So he's like, right, come on, we've never had more resources, more focus on it, more awareness of it, but people still keep getting worse. More people are getting mentally ill. So he's like, look, we can't just keep doing the same things. And part of that he thinks is this focus on happiness. But happiness, like in that quote, is not the same as functioning well. So you can be really, really happy in a moment, but it still doesn't mean that you're functioning well. And he just highlights, look, people tend to prefer these quick fixes. So, if you like, just go and write a gratitude journal or just get into a bit of mindfulness and do that. But he's like, it's quick fix. You're too focused on happiness, but you got to get busy and do some work, like true meaning, which is a part of flourishing. You've got to get out into the world and engage with it and get out there and be active. So it's like feeling good isn't enough if there's no meaning going with it. It just lacks that substance. So it's like he likens it actually to a junk food diet. It's like you can go and eat a load of junk food and like it'll taste good and you might feel good for a few minutes, but ultimately you're going to get unhealthier and unhealthier and unhealthier the more of it you eat. It's not the same. There's no substance to it. So you've just got to be aware of that. Now, he says that if we're going to try and promote flourishing, he sees it as there's these 5 activities, so these 5 behavioural vitamins if you've got a flourishing deficiency. So like if you had a poor diet, you've been on a junk food diet, it's like, well, I'm low on, I don't know, potassium, magnesium, iron, and whatever. What foods would I eat for that? So it's a little bit like that. What do you need to eat? What do you need to do to kick in a bit of flourishing? And he just has these 5 things. So the first one, like we've talked about, helping others. Like that's just a key part of it. Contributing to another person's happiness can bring out the best glow in yourself. That's, again, quoting him. And he's like, you don't have to go like massive. You don't have to go and start being like a volunteer at a homeless shelter or something and that. Like, he's just start small. Just like you, have a crack with your neighbour on a morning and give them a bit of time. Feel like they're valued and things like that. That's enough. Helping others in little small ways, that can be enough. Keep it small, keep it local.
Make them feel important in a way by giving them that time.
Give them your attention. Like, don't be on your phone. Like, give them your undivided, even if it's 2 minutes chatting shit about the weather.
Yeah.
That helps them feel grounded in their day and feel valued and seen and all that stuff. So helping others. Second one, learn something new. So this isn't about building a skill for immediate, like, oh, well, if I do that, I'll get economic reward somehow, or, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily be a practical, immediate thing. It's just like, what are you doing to grow and improve, which feels good for you? What are you genuinely passionate about? What are you into? What interests you? You've got to keep that going. So it might be, right, well, I'm going to learn a musical instrument. It might be, I'm going to learn how to paint, or it might be, I'm going to get a garden and start getting paradise going. Doesn't matter, but just keep learning. You've got to keep learning. So again, to quote Corey Keyes, learning something new of your own choosing on your own time for your own reasons is a surprisingly potent antidote to languishing. I think that's like a good quote, and it's like, come on, like, keep learning, don't stagnate it, don't get stuck, keep moving. Third one is about socializing. So you've got to just get those relationships going. You've got to have that warm with other people. And it's not necessarily more connections, like we said earlier, it's what's the quality of your connections like. So are you spending good quality time with people? That's just a massive part of flourishing. Fourth one, you mentioned it a couple of times, play, which is probably easy when you're a kid, innit? But how many adults genuinely play now? You say, oh, what are you playing at? It's not really a thing, is it? You've got to be playing. And I like the way he distinguishes when it comes to leisure. Leisure for him is basically adult play. So that's our version of when we're a kid and we're just playing with the toys or whatever. It's like, yeah, your version is leisure. But he distinguishes between active and passive leisure. So like passive leisure is just watching Netflix and doing a box set, and like you're just consuming it, it's passively coming at you. Whereas active leisure is like you've got to get out into the world and engage with it. So whether that's hobbies or gardening or whatever, it's like you can't just sit back and consume it. You've got to get out and do it. And that's a major thing for flourishing.
Well, playing sport would be a good one. Playing sport compared to going in the gym where you're just like sometimes just polishing your body for an image. Well, fine, but playing a game, I see that with the squash. See people playing it. Saying that though, one or two get hyper competitive and get miserable if they're not winning. Whereas I always think, even with golf, when I play, and I've enjoyed it more actually, and as I've got older, and even the squash is you can win and you can lose, and you can tell a lot, can't you, by how someone wins and loses in sport. They can give it everything, especially when they're amateurs. You know, mainly when they're amateurs, and they can shake hands, laugh at themselves, and go, "I can't believe I lost. I'm gutted." All right, we won. But the play element of it, and also that adapting rules. I think when you're there and you suddenly make something into a game, or you make it like, oh, let's just put these rules in, or let's make the game easier so that we can all have fun and level it out. Think a good round of golf's like that with four people of all different ages and standards. You make it so that everyone has a chance to win. And you put all these little rules in. There's probably hundreds of versions, isn't there, of how to score and play golf, just to make it like, oh, like, come on, you've always got a chance to hit a good shot, and oh, I missed it, you know. And those, it's so absurd and childish, but it's actually good for your soul, isn't it? You want to go back and hit that shot again. So that's
why I've packed in again this year. I need another year off because I've just like, I'm too obsessed with the scorecard again, and like swinging and hitting it's just like, nah, I need some time away and then come back as more of an amateur, like beginner mindset of just like, right, let's just play. It's fun of playing again. Corey Keyes actually says, it's funny how he said about making stuff into games. He actually talks about when he's mowing his lawn, he'll turn it into a bit of a game where he'll create like patterns in the grass and like different lines and like almost artwork in his grass when he's cutting it. So it doesn't have to be, I'm playing sport. It could be Irene cutting a hedge with a particular, like, you know, like where you can turn stuff into a game. And that's what he's talking about.
Playful element. Like you have your own little quirky little ways of doing things, don't you? Yeah. Or, you know, walking down the road and not stepping on a crack. Not for superstition, but just bouncing along. Can I do it? Oh, we'll walk along this fence and don't fall off. So then little bits of like things you might have done as a kid imaginatively. There's loads of little fun things like that.
So he talks about exactly that. Turn those little everyday mundane tasks into more like play. Like, how can you make them more playful? And it's just, for him, it's one of his 5 vitamins. It's a massively important part of flourishing. If you're not doing that, you're going to be more likely to be languishing. So there we go. And then the 5th one, which I suppose we do really well in a way, like the fact we even do this podcast, he calls it participating in spiritual and religious activities, but he's really clear that that doesn't necessarily mean like being religious by going to church or becoming a spiritual Buddhist, and that's my kind of form. He's like, it's just something more beyond you. So like philosophy, he talks about actually that allows you to think and behave in different ways because it just gets you outside of your kind of same way you're doing things, I suppose. And we do that loads with, I suppose philosophy for us is quite spiritual in a way, isn't it? You're just tuning into like what makes me tick, who am I, what do I value, what am I about? I think that's spiritual and religious part of it. Anyone who does listen to us rabbit on here, they're maybe doing that. The fact that they listen to a podcast like this, which is about philosophy and psychology and those things, they must be doing some aspect of that to even bother listening to it.
Yeah, the history of ideas it's good, isn't it? It's history. It's, any history is so spiritual because you're connected through. You're thinking, gosh, they did this 500 years ago. They were having the Greeks were. I loved it on that film, The Holdovers, which was good.
Yeah,
philosophy professor saying to the kids, weren't he? And he took him to the Greek Antiquity Museum, and he said to him, like every emotion you're having, every little sneaky feeling and jealousy and passion and everything, that the Greeks had all these emotions 10 to 15, 20,000 years back, and they were all debauched and they were all passionate and they were all angry and they were all and then the kid went, well, when you explain it like that, then you're interesting. Normally you're boring in your lectures, and I thought that were good. All the things that's a spiritual thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
All through history, forever and ever and ever, all these people have been having exactly the same thoughts and things. Even languishing itself.
That's what he was saying. Is like those little things help you. It's something beyond yourself to encourage you when you do feel a bit down or a bit weak or a bit sad or whatever. Having that spiritual, religious, philosophical side helps you then get back on track to flourishing, doesn't it? 'Cause it's like, oh, I understand it. It's just a human thing there.
Yeah.
And on I can go. So there is 5 things. And basically he's done a lot of research over the years and he's pretty firm in his conclusions that people who are flourishing do far more of those 5 activities all the time. And when they stop doing them, they start to move towards languishing. And he's like, over lots of different studies and different ways he's done it, that's a pretty clear finding. And then, like we said, beyond that, the people who then end up languishing for too long are more likely to become depressed. And then that can turn to mental illness down the line. And that goes back to what he's saying, like his focus is let's stop focusing on mental illness. How can we help more people move from languishing to flourishing? And that'll sort of solve the mental illness problem without even talking about mental illness. We're talking about mental health, genuine mental health, which is flourishing. So there we go. Any final words for you, Danny, before we depart?
No, we're going to go for a lie down.
I'm going to go flourish in the garden, get back to paradise.
When we dance, the journey itself is the point. When we play music, you will simply become completely absorbed in sound. And therefore you will find yourself living in an eternal now in which there is no past and there is no future and there is no thing called difference between yourself and the world of nature outside you. This is red. This is green. This is something. This is nothing. This is solid. This is space. Between yourself and the world of nature outside you.